You all know that India has been exploited for several centuries by different foreign invaders, foreign rulers, and foreign merchants. Most of them were Europeans. The extent of exploitation by the British people were the most. Let me explain you. The level of oppression of the British police and officials was more than the bearable capacity of common people in India. The British rulers often beat the Indian people and abused the rural folk by calling them native people, black people, and they used abusive words such as idiots, bloody swines, etc. These were also used by the civilized whites on the innocent Indians. The white people mostly treated the Indians as their servants. While going through some literature in the Google search engine, I found a photo where an Englishman was reading a newspaper, maybe or a book, while a thin and poor Indian with scanty clothes was massaging his legs, and another poor Indian was fanning him with a big hand fan. Not only that, they did not hesitate to whip them if they did not obey their words in full. There are many books published on the tyranny and exploitation of the British Raj from India and abroad. But I would like to mention only two works, including the recent one by Shashi Tharoor, a Congress MP, in his The Inglorious Empire, What the British Did to India. This is the name of his book. In that book, he revealed how Indians were plundered by the British rulers. He wrote, quote, "Beyond conquest and deception, the empire blew rebels from cannon, massacred unarmed protesters, entrenched institutionalized racism, and caused millions to die from starvation." Unquote. A good review of the book was published in the Irish Times by Dr. Diarmaid Ferriter, a professor of modern Irish history at the University College Dublin. It is learned from the review of the book that under British rule, India's share of world manufacturing exports fell from 27% to 2%, as East India employees made colossal fortunes. The Marquis of Salisbury, Secretary of State for India in the 1870s, remarked that, quote, "India is to bleed," unquote. And by the end of the 19th century, it was Britain's biggest source of revenue. Any logical person would be amazed to know that by 1890, about 6,000 British officials ruled 250 million Indians, and there was also a craveness, cupidity, opportunism, and lack of organized resistance on the part of the vanquished. The British resorted to caste politics and used a two nation theory that eventually divided the country and made partition inevitable. It seems that Lord Clive's earlier plan of 1905 was fulfilled in 1947 through the partition of two nations purely based on religion, but these caused 1 million people killings and the displacement of another 17 million people. Tharoor points out that both the Muslim and the Hindu people habitually worked together in pre-colonial times because of the British officialdom's favor of the Muslim community to offset Hindu nationalism. The British also sponsored a Shia-Sunni divide in Lucknow and generally transformed religious differences into public, political, and legal lines. The best examples of brutalities were seen in the Jallianwala Bagh massacre of 1919, where soldiers emptying their magazines into the shrieking, wailing, then stampeding crowd with trained precision. Unquote. India was such a wonderful goose that laid the golden egg constantly for the British rulers. Not only that, Britain used the windfall from their fraudulent system to fuel the engines of imperial violence, funding the invasion of China in the 1840s and the suppression of the Sepoy-led mutiny in 1857. The British Crown took money directly from Indian taxpayers to pay for its wars. The economist Utsa Pattanak nicely pointed out that, quote, the cost of all Britain's wars of conquest outside Indian borders were charged always wholly or mainly to Indian revenues, unquote. Not only that, Britain used its flow of tribute from India to finance the expansion of capitalism in Europe and regions of European settlement like Canada and Australia. So, not only the industrialization of Britain, but also the industrialization of much of the Western world was facilitated by extraction from the colonies, particularly in India. Quote, Patnaik identifies four distinct economic periods in colonial India from 1765 to 1938, calculates the extraction for each and then compounds at a moderate rate of interest, about 5%, which is lower than the market rate. However, from the middle of the each period to the present, adding it all up, she finds that the total drain amount to $44.6 trillion. This figure is conservative, she says, and does not include the debts that Britain imposed on India during the Raj. Unquote. Another sorrowful fact is that during the entire 190 years history of British rule in India, there was almost no increase in per capita income. In fact, during the last half of the 19th century, the heyday of British intervention, income in India what happened? That income in India collapsed by half. The average life expectancy of Indians dropped by a fifth from 1870 to 1920. Tens of millions died needlessly of policy-induced famine. Britain did not develop India. Rather, Professor Patnaik's work makes it clear that India developed Britain. However, it was often pointed out by the votaries of empire that the phenomenon of drainage was exaggerated. A modern historian would put the amount of drainage to 17 million pounds per annum in the late 19th and the early 20th centuries, and point out that these represented less than 2% of the value of India's exports of commodities in that period. So, this was the extent of exploitation of the British rulers in India. Hence, the situation made by the British rulers to India is beyond description. From that situation, India waged freedom struggle, and after continuous struggle of almost 150 years, India got independence in 1947. Since then, after independence, Free India started working for development of this country, and in the last decade, India's development became a history to the people of the world, particularly the policymakers and the heads of states. In the next video, we will try to see how India became fifth largest economy in last 10 years. Thank you.